Good evening, my dear Exiles, and welcome to a retrospective review. In this video, I, along with friend of the channel Kei-Nova, will be taking a look back at another thoroughly underappreciated title, Zone of the Enders 2, The Second Runner, and telling you why you should definitely give it a look. Zone of the Enders is a PlayStation 2-era third-person action series that features fast-paced, triaxial combat, a thrilling science fiction narrative, and some of the coolest-looking giant robots in the business. It's the brainchild of Noriaki Okamura, one of Metal Gear Solid creator Hideo Kojima's longest-tenured lieutenants. And speaking of talented personnel, the mechanical designs for all of the giant robots were done by the one and only Yoji Shinkawa, another of Kojima's most frequent collaborators. If you're familiar with any of the aforementioned Metal Gear Solid games, then you know his work. The machines he's created for this series are probably my favorite mechanical designs in the entirety of fiction. That's how damn cool they look. So we've got the cachet of creatives that speaks for itself, but what about the game? When Zone of the Enders first came out, it was packaged with the demo for Metal Gear Solid 2, which was the main reason most people decided to pick up a copy of it. I know at least a couple of people personally who bought it just to play the MGS2 demo, and never even bothered checking out the game it came with, which is a crying shame. With that in mind, Kei-Nova and I want to explain to you just what's so awesome about this game, this series, and why you should give it a chance. So, let us slip the surly bonds of Earth and voyage out toward the Red Planet for a retrospective look at why you should play Zone of the Enders 2, The Second Runner. Now, there have been several different releases of this game, so the one that we're specifically going to be looking at is the version that's currently available on Steam, which is the Mars edition. This means that it's the HD remaster and comes with VR support, though unfortunately I lack the equipment to run it that way. But, that said, we still have the remastered graphics, which are super sharp and absolutely gorgeous. Now, before we get to delving into the plot and gameplay, there are a couple of terms we need to define, just to make sure things go smoothly. So, let's briefly talk about orbital frames, their pilots, Metatron ore, and compressed space. Orbital frames. Orbital frames are giant robots, usually, though not always, designed in a humanoid configuration, constructed out of Metatron ore, and created for the purpose of waging war. Most of the enemies you encounter throughout the ZOE series fall under this category in some form or another. Almost all of the rank-and-file enemies you fight are autonomous frames, while bosses tend to be piloted by named characters, and typically come with some sort of onboard AI. They're capable of extreme, physics-defying feats, such as flying at hypersonic speeds, storing weaponry inside pockets of compressed space known as vector traps, and even teleportation. Pilots of orbital frames are known as frame runners, hence the title of the game. Metatron ore. The unique substance used to construct orbital frames and their armaments, among other things. Metatron possesses a number of supernatural qualities, including the ability to tap into compressed space, allowing for nigh infinite storage of objects, which is also what allows orbital frames to teleport.
Just using zero shift.
It has been suggested that Metatron-based computers, such as the AIs found in high-tier frames, are capable of achieving a degree of actual sentience.
Damn.
Enders. Finally, we have the title term of the series, Enders. This is a derogatory term used by those who remain on Earth to refer to those people who live among the outer planets and their colonies. So, as the games take place on a space colony orbiting Jupiter and on Mars, respectively, thus you have the name of the setting, Zone of the Enders. In Zone of the Enders 2, you play as former military pilot turned Metatron miner Dingo Egret. I know, who was originally a soldier and squad leader working in the employ of the villainous military organization, Baram. However, after the disastrous failure of a mission escorting a shipment of Metatron ore out to Jupiter, he called it quits and fled to the icy moon of Callisto to mine Metatron. When the game opens, Dingo is just mining and minding his own business on the frozen satellite, talking sports with his coworkers and reminiscing about times past. Suddenly, the scanner on his rabbit mining lev pings a nearby source of Metatron. But there's something odd about it.
That's unusual.
What is?
Indications of Metatron, but it's way too shallow. Angie, I want to change the landing point. I'll check it out.
Okay.
Rick, you hear that? I'll be back soon.
Dingo jets off to investigate the source of the signal, and we get a glimpse of a giant ship overhead, doing things like lurking and being ominous. Whatever it is, it doesn't look good. Upon reaching the source of the signal, turns out that Dingo's supposition about it being too shallow to be a normal Metatron vein was correct. It's not a deposit of Metatron ore at all, but instead an artifact resembling a giant metal coffin. That's odd. I wonder what could be inside. His curiosity getting the better of him, Dingo hops out of the rabbit to investigate. Inside, he discovers the mother of all inciting incidents, the orbital frame, known as Jehuti. This beast of a machine is one of a pair of twins, developed to be the most advanced orbital frames ever known, and inhabited by a revolutionary AI construct known as Ada. Things suddenly go sideways as that ominously lurking ship reappears, loosing a swarm of autonomous combat frames called Raptors, seemingly intent upon destroying the coffin and its contents. The ship belongs to the series' main antagonists, the aforementioned independent military organization, Baram.
Damn Baram.
Baram from Mars? How can you tell?
They're a Mars-based anti-Earth revolutionary force, in possession of a great number of both autonomous and manned orbital frames, with designs on dominion over Mars. In short, they're the bad guys, and they're bad news.
Good morning. Ready for combat operation.
And now, here's Kei-Nova, with some insights on combat and gameplay.
Zone of Enders, the second runner, manages to strike a unique balance with its combat system, offering a blend of simplicity and complexity that keeps players engaged from start to finish. On the surface, the game's mechanics are easy to grasp. Most of your time is spent locking onto enemies, unleashing massive laser barrages, and tossing opponents around the battlefield like ragdolls. This fast-paced, frenetic style of combat is part of what makes the game so immediately satisfying. Given the game's relatively short length, it's unsurprising that much of it is designed to be accessible and pretty easy to pick up, with the core mechanics requiring minimal skill or tutorializing to execute. A brief action-packed experience like Zo 2 benefits from this simplicity, ensuring that the flow of gameplay remains uninterrupted. In many ways, this straightforwardness is reminiscent of classic games from earlier eras, where the focus was on providing players with a fun and replayable experience, rather than bogging them down with an overabundance of side quests or unlockable content. Sometimes a game just needs to be pure, unadulterated fun, and the second runner excels in that regard. However, to claim that Zo 2 is purely simple would be a disservice to the depth hidden beneath its surface. While Hideo Kojima, known for his layered game design, served as the producer, it was actually Shio Murata, the lead developer, who infused the game with a multitude of optional elements that add layers of complexity for those willing to dive deeper. Much like Kojima's other major title at the time, Metal Gear Solid 2, Zo 2 is filled to the brim with a diverse array of weapons, gadgets, and sub-weapons, many of which are completely optional. Players can easily complete the game without ever touching some of these items, such as the Gauntlet, Javelin, Floating Mine, or Geyser. Their inclusion almost feels like a hidden layer of the game, waiting for those willing to explore its possibilities. It's entirely possible to play through the second runner multiple times without ever realizing the full extent of what these sub-weapons can do. On one hand, this design choice can feel like a missed opportunity. After all, why include so many mechanics if they're not integral to the gameplay? But on the other hand, it speaks to Murata's design philosophy, similar to Kojima's, of offering players freedom. Much like Metal Gear Solid 2, Zo 2 is a game of choices. For some players, the weapons provide replay value as they experiment with their effects and discover new ways to approach combat. For others, these optional mechanics might come across as unnecessary fluff in a game that, at times, seems more focused on showcasing ideas rather than perfecting execution. This dichotomy between simplicity and complexity becomes most evident in how the game handles its combat encounters and level design. Unfortunately, the second runner falters when it strays too far from its core mechanics. While the early portions of the game focus on larger scale open battles where players are free to experiment with the various combat systems, the later stages become bogged down by gimmicky boss fights and really restrictive scenarios. This shift in design drastically reduces the number of standard enemy encounters, limiting the opportunities for players to fully explore the game's combat depth. By the time players reach the midpoint of the game, marked by the infamous Viola AI boss battle, the freedom of movement and experimentation that defined the earlier sections of the game is replaced by a series of tightly controlled and, at times, frustrating sequences. Instead of engaging in freeform combat, players find themselves juggling tasks like carrying other mechs, navigating through minefields.
Wait, stop. Slowly correct the direction little by little.
And protecting structures from oncoming damage. While these scenarios introduce variety, they also strip away much of what made the initial combat so enjoyable. What's particularly frustrating is that these later stages feel like a departure from the game's strengths. Instead of building on the freedom and creativity of the earlier portions, the game funnels players into more constrained and repetitive encounters. The only real standard stage that remains after the Viola battle involves destroying generators to disable force fields, a far cry from the open, dynamic battles that define the first half of the game. This could have been an opportunity to showcase the game's versatility, but instead it ends up spreading the core mechanics way too thin, undermining the experience by focusing too heavily on situational gimmicks rather than refining and expanding the core combat systems. In hindsight, it's easy to see why Zone of Enders: The Second Runner has been bundled with the first game in subsequent releases, such as the PS3 and Xbox 360 remasters, or why the more recent Mars version added features like VR mode that feel somewhat tacked on. When viewed in isolation, The Second Runner is an undeniably fun experience, but one that leaves a bit to be desired in terms of longevity and depth. However, when you step back and consider the larger context in which the game exists, things start to make a little more sense. This title wasn't necessarily designed to stand entirely on its own. Rather, it seems that Zo 2 was meant to be part of a larger multimedia experience. The game ties into a broader narrative that included the first Zone of Enders game, the Zone of Enders anime film, and the Zone of Enders: The Fist of Mars GBA game. When considered as part of this larger narrative arc, the second runner feels more like a piece of the puzzle rather than a standalone experience. Ultimately, while Zone of Enders the Second Runner remains a classic for many valid reasons, it's clear that its true potential lies in its connection to a greater whole. The game is filled with moments of brilliance, from its stylish visuals to its fast-paced, exhilarating combat, but it also struggles with inconsistent pacing and underutilized mechanics. Zo 2 is overall a fascinating, if not flawed gem, one that captures the imagination even as it leaves some elements a little bit underdeveloped.
Confirming the enemy destroyed.
What is the efficiency of this frame?
This is orbital frame Jehuti.
Once Dingo and Jehuti have wiped out the initial waves of autonomous frames, he chases after the Bahram carrier in an attempt to rescue one of his friends, whose lev was damaged in the attack.
Put me through to 663.
Yes, I'll connect you now.
Help me, Dingo!
Where are you?
My legs are damaged!
Rick, where are you now?
As we arrive on the scene, we're introduced to the next major character, the pilot of a caped, feminine orbital frame called Arjet. This red-haired young lady is Ken Marineris, one of Bahram's top frame runners, and she's here to retrieve Jehuti.
Beat it, Rick! Dingo?
The two pilots exchange barbs before engaging in our first proper frame-to-frame duel.
Since I found Jehuti, you'll have to give it to me.
Get lost.
With the fight done and dusted, Ken flees the battlefield for the safety of the Bahram carrier. Realizing that the paramilitary organization is here for the machine he's piloting, Dingo opts to follow her, both to divert Bahram's forces away from his comrades and to hopefully get some answers. Just before boarding the ship, Ada warns him that there's an especially dangerous source of energy somewhere on board, which Dingo immediately proceeds to disregard. That's not at all worrisome. Now that we're aboard the Bahram ship, the next noteworthy foe we stumble across is several degrees more dangerous than anything we've faced thus far. Passing through a room containing a sort of energy cradle, we're stopped by a locked door and forced to face off with an especially malicious AI-piloted frame, Nephthys. This rose-colored unit is the second coming of an orbital frame called Neith, one of the first game's primary antagonists. It's piloted by an AI version of the original frame runner, Viola Gyun, a Bahram officer who died at the end of the first game. The resurrected AI is a thoroughly capable pilot, and it's possessed of a single-minded rage at Jehuti for having defeated it in the past. After beating the sci-fi stuffing out of Nephthys, Ada gives Dingo a brief synopsis of the first game's events that led to Jehuti being entombed on Callisto. However, their conversation is cut short when she suddenly recognizes the strange power source mentioned earlier. A resonant reaction with another orbital frame. You remember when I said Jehuti was one of a pair of twins? Well, the greater scope villain of the series, Colonel Ridley Noman, is in possession of the other twin, a bestial, jackal-headed frame called Anubis, and it seems he is also aboard the carrier. As Jehuti's heads-up display turns a dire crimson, we also get a hint of recognition from Dingo at the mention of that name. In the darkened chamber that follows, Dingo at last comes face to face with Noman and his Anubis. In such close proximity, The resonance between the two orbital frames causes Jehuti to go briefly haywire as its trademark blue Metatron veins turn a worrisome red.
Give that orbital frame back.
Noman demands that Dingo hand Jehuti over to Bahram, and before our hero can respond, he attempts to take it by force. Damn, give the guy a chance. Unfortunately for Dingo, at this point neither he nor Jehuti are any match for Anubis and the Colonel. In short order, the K9 orbital frame wipes the floor and walls and ceiling with Jehuti, leaving it temporarily paralyzed. With Dingo now at his mercy, Noman at last recognizes him. They share a common past, as Dingo served under Noman during his time as a Bahram soldier.
Dingo!
And just when it seems that things can't get any worse, Nephthys reappears. And between the two of them, the villainous orbital frames put Jehuti out of commission. With Jehuti down for the count, Noman bids Dingo disembark for a face-to-face rendezvous.
You get off and come to my room.
In the hallway that adjoins the hangar, Dingo encounters Ken, who's none too pleased to see him.
Welcome! Punch!
Just as they're getting into it, with Dingo accusing Ken of murdering his comrades, the deathly pale, insidious Noman appears, striding out of the darkness, a mocking smirk upon his snake-like face. Even if you're not up on your fiction tropes, you can tell right away. This guy is capital B, capital N, bad news. He looks like a fucking sci-fi Voldemort, for Christ's sakes.
Dingo, Egret?
Military records show him dead.
The two exchange barbs as the Colonel attempts to convince Dingo to rejoin Bahram under his command, which our boy, naturally, refuses. But apparently Noman's a bit insecure and doesn't take kindly to rejection. Ken looks on in shock as her commanding officer riddles Dingo with bullets, leaving him choking on a cloud of his own blood. Noman callously tells her to
Dispose of the body.
before taking his leave. Huh. Well, that sucks. For Dingo, at least. As Noman walks away, Ken tells Dingo that she can keep him alive if he'll agree to help her. Although that doesn't really seem like a fair ask, now does it? It looks like Noman hit his heart and or lungs, so I'm not sure he could even refuse if he wanted to. With that, we get a fade to white and, at last, a title screen. Welcome to Zone of the Enders 2, The Second Runner. Fast forward 2 months. On the Mars satellite of Deimos, we rejoin Ken and Dingo, who's being attended to by a bunch of anonymous scientist types. Our protagonist looks quite a bit the worse for wear, though at least he's still alive. Somehow. Dingo gets placed into Jehuti's cockpit on what is probably a more permanent basis than he's comfortable with. When he was shot by Noman, he lost the use of both his heart and lungs. Hey, what do you know, I was right. And so now is kept alive purely by a direct connection to Jehuti's systems. Ken didn't do this just to be nice, however. It seems Miss Marineris has a bit of an agenda, and much like his namesake, she intends to use Dingo as a loyal dog to do her dirty work.
I can give your real body back, so you'd better just accept my orders.
Don't be ridiculous. How can I follow Bahram?
I'm not Bahram.
Furthermore, she says she's not working for Bahram at all. Apparently, she's actually employed by Earth's military body, the United Nations Space Force, which I'm just going to refer to as the SF going forwards. Bahram was originally a division of said organization before tensions between Earth and Mars caused a split, as the Enders attempted to assert their independence and rebelled.
The minute you get off Jehuti, it will stop providing energy. You will die if you leave Jehuti.
Oh, don't talk nonsense.
Well, try it if you like.
After proving her point, Ken gives Dingo the task of finding his way down to the surface of Mars, and thus departs, leaving him to get better acquainted with Ada. It's revealed that while Dingo was comatose, Bahram and Nomen effected a complete takeover of Mars and her satellites. That's not good. We've got to get planetside, ASAP. While making progress toward the catapult that's capable of launching him down to the Red Planet, Dingo receives a request for aid from an SF agent named Taper, who's stranded on the station.
I received a rescue signal.
Ignore it.
Connected.
This is Taper. I'm stuck with a cargo of freight. Please help me.
In spilling his sob story to Dingo, Taper mentions a weapon called the Vector Cannon, which is capable of using the same vector trap technology that powers Anubis' ability to teleport, and Jehuti's ability to store sub-weapons.
Vector cannon?
Please help Taper Dingo. We need to get it.
Just as we're wrapping the conversation up, Ken chimes in about Bahram's plans regarding something called Auman.
The military fortress, Auman.
Auman.
Seems like that could be important. We should probably keep that in mind for later.
Taper, I'm coming to help you. Don't move from where you are.
I'm hiding in a container.
Dingo finds Taper hiding in a cargo container, and after freeing him, learns that the SF operative has his own mission down on Mars. To rescue the citizens of Visalia County and retrieve the Vector Cannon from the occupying Bahram forces. His lev is damaged, however, so we're gonna have to carry him with us to the catapult. Doesn't that just sound like fun? We fight our way through a bunch of Bahram orbital frames before depositing Taper in a cargo container set to be launched down to the Martian surface. Just as Dingo is about to get the lowdown on the conflict between the SF and Bahram that flared up while he was comatose, more enemy orbital frames appear, and Taper launches himself off the station, leaving Dingo to find his own way down.
It doesn't look any different. What's that?
Upon clearing out the latest batch of Bahram forces, Dingo is suddenly alerted to the incoming presence of Nephthys and the Viola AI, who's so desperate to take Dingo's head that she's literally plowing headfirst through the walls between the two of them. Not wanting anything to do with that mess, Dingo powers up Jehuti's thrusters and nopes the hell out of there. Upon descending to Mars itself, Dingo is shocked to find that there's nothing but burnt and broken ruins as far as the eye can see. It turns out that our landing zone is the site of a recent battle between the SF and the Bahram-led Martian Liberation Movement. Apparently, a month prior, the SF attacked Visalia County, the seat of Bahram's power on Mars, and suffered almost total defeat. However, in doing so, they discovered the evidence of the vector cannon's existence, which is crucial in their plans to take down the villainous organization. This is because Bahram's HQ, the aforementioned Auman, apparently a fortress of some sort, is protected by a barrier of compressed space, which can only be pierced by such a weapon.
Here, burned ruins stretched as far as the eye can see.
You were living in the backwoods, so you couldn't know.
As for what Auman is, designed by Noman's father and constructed by the Colonel himself, it is both a space fortress of colossal scale, capable of manufacturing countless amounts of unmanned orbital frames, and a weapon of mass destruction. Using the power of a moon-sized vector trap, if activated, it could destroy not just planets, but potentially entire solar systems. So you can see why it's so important that we retrieve the vector cannon and use it to help destroy Auman. In the hands of a maniac like Noman, Auman's existence puts the survival of the entire human race in jeopardy. As for where Dingo, Jehuti, Noman, and Anubis fit into all this, well, the two orbital frames effectively function as keys to starting up the superweapon. In order to either activate or deactivate the space fortress, one must possess both frames. Anyways, no time to ruminate on that now. Looks like we've got incoming.
Sorry to interrupt your conversation, but an unidentified combat vehicle is approaching.
That stranger.
After taking out a few waves of Bahram troops, our battle is suddenly interrupted by the arrival of a white Lev. The mysterious, yet strangely familiar pilot takes out the next wave of Bahram frames before engaging Dingo in battle. The pilot in question is named Leo Stenbuck, and the machine he's flying is a transforming Lev called the Vic Viper. If Leo's name rings a bell, that's because he was the protagonist of the first game in the series, as well as Jehuti's original runner. In the 2 years between when the first and second games take place, it seems he's grown up quite a lot. In ZOE 1, he was just a scared little kid, but he's since matured into a pilot of considerable ability.
Ada. Long time no see. You remember me?
Yes, the data is a perfect match with the previous runner.
You haven't changed a bit.
You're the owner of this frame, aren't you?
That's right.
Why did you abandon Jehuti on Callisto?
Without consulting me, Elena...
Elena?
That's not your business! Anyway, get out of Jehuti.
You want me to leave Jehuti? Don't be silly. I can't leave even if it means I die.
Ada recognizes Leo, and he reveals to Dingo that she's programmed to seek out the core of Auman and self-destruct, with the intent of destroying the fortress and putting a stop to Noman's plans. Given that he's stuck in the cockpit, our boy Dingo obviously has a bit of an issue with this.
Alright, I get rid of Auman. Then you don't need to blow up Jehuti. Isn't that right?
He tells Ada that he'll use Jehuti to destroy Auman, so she won't have to blow herself up. But Leo cuts in with the assertion that he wants to be the one to do it, making it clear that he still has some emotional attachment to both Jehuti and Ada. Aw, isn't that sweet? Dingo and Leo temporarily press pause on their debate as to who's going to be the one to take on the Colonel, and he tells us that he'll go ahead and head to Visalia to assist the SF unit in their fight against Bahram. Finally, before he departs, he warns Dingo of just how dangerous Anubis is, something that we're already well aware of. So saying, Jehuti's former runner and her current pilot part ways. As a trio of Bahram warships pass overhead, we get a call from Ken, warning us to stay low as we head to Vasilia ourselves. With that said, we've got our marching orders. Head to Vasilia proper, assist the remaining SF unit there, retrieve the vector cannon, and use it to bust open the way to Aumon. Next up, a network of canyons that lead to Vasilia's southern gate. Unfortunately, the gate is closed, and because this is, a video game, we can't just hop over it. We travel the length of the canyon, destroying the generators powering the force field at either end, leaving the route clear to proceed through to Vasilia City. Or we would be able to, were it not for someone, or something, standing in our way.
Viola, you're already here.
I found you. Get ready. Entertain me.
It's Nephthys, having finally caught up with us, and she's determined to stop us from interfering with Noman's plans any further. The fight takes us from the end of the canyon through the gate to Vasilia proper, where the Viola AI traps us in an energy cage as she attempts to destroy Jehuti. However, now that Dingo and Ada are more in sync, this trap proves to be Nephthys' downfall. We dodge her Remy attacks, and upon slamming into the energy barriers, the AI's orbital frame is temporarily disabled, allowing us to get some good hits in. As we deal a final blow and the walls drop, Jehuti absorbs a mass of Metatron energy from the ruined Nephthys, granting us another sub-weapon.
We obtained the device driver for the sub-weapon Comet.
When I was with Bahram, Viola was the last person I wanted as an enemy.
Dingo reminisces over his friendship with the human Viola that the AI was modeled after, and we get a message from Taper. He's here, in Vasilia City, with some other SF troops, on their way to meet up with the unit in possession of the vector cannon. It seems that we're not out of the woods just yet, though. Bahram is launching an attack on Vasilia City, more than the meager number of SF troops can hope to contain. Dingo and Ada discuss their battle plans and move in to assist, hoping to take out Bahram's contingent of unmanned drones before the death toll grows too great.
This is Storm Company.
What are you doing? Do you want to involve civilians?
Who cares?
Ada!
Which are you going to help? The Space Force or civilian buildings?
Both!
All right.
It's here that we start to see a bit more of Dingo's personality shine through. In communication with the leader of the SF unit, the officer in charge makes it clear he doesn't give a damn whether or not there's collateral damage from their battle with Bahram's forces, which Dingo is absolutely not on board with. Can't say I blame him. That's pretty cold. Based on his history with Bahram, especially his betrayal at Noman's hands that resulted in the death of his entire unit, he's developed a bit of a compassionate side, even if he tries to hide it under a thick layer of snark. With Bahram's forces destroyed and Vasilia City safe for the time being, we get an update on the vector cannon's location from Taper. Apparently the unit in possession of it is at a place called Ayers Cliff, somewhere along the nearby coastline, and it just so happens that there's a Bahram transport train departing for that exact location that we can sorta, kinda not really, hitch a ride on. Time to ride the rails.
The rear carriage is destroyed.
After stopping the train and resuming our trek to meet up with the squad carrying the vector cannon, we catch up with Ken, who's finally made it down to Mars. She and Dingo have a brief, if somewhat testy, discussion of his past as a Bahram soldier, in which she chastises him for his decision to leave Bahram and hide out on Callisto, instead of returning to the military organization and inciting an uprising against Noman, as Dingo was the only frame runner capable of matching the Colonel in combat. Frustrated, Dingo hangs up on her and gets in touch with the SF unit to confirm their plans to rendezvous. However, their communication is suddenly cut short as a mysterious presence ambushes them. Uh-oh, that can't be good.
Take position. Pull back. Pull back.
Taper, what's going on?
Such speed.
Oh, God!
It's here that the atmosphere turns a bit grim. Almost spooky. We arrive at Ayers Cliff and find the SF squad completely destroyed. Their levs nothing but smoking wrecks. We pursue the culprit into a nearby energy plant, filled with unmanned orbital frames and a revived and repaired Nephthys, who's taken possession of the vector cannon. Now we know what it was that wiped out the SF unit. Well, you know what they say, you can't keep a dedicated yandere down. Or something like that. Time to get a little revenge, and put the Viola AI down for good and all. Following a tense hide-and-seek battle with the Viola AI, we finally mangle the rose-colored orbital frame beyond repair. As Nephthys collapses in a ruined heap, and we take possession of the vector cannon, Dingo looks back at his friendship with the real Viola, who he considered to be a hell of a pilot, one last time. Unfortunately, it seems he left the comms open and was overheard by Taper, who accuses him of being in league with Bahram.
Were you on Bahram's side?
Not now, I'm not.
You'd think he'd have more faith in us by now, after we saved his ass a few hours ago. And a few hours again before that. Man, he really owes Dingo his life, huh?
You're lying! You're still with Bahram!
Have you forgotten I saved you on Deimos?
Just as Dingo is trying to convince Taper of his innocence, Ken arrives in Argit. Her appearance is thoroughly ill-timed, though. She makes the mistake of getting too close to the remains of Nephthys, allowing the Viola AI to contaminate Ken's frame, taking control of it. Dingo now has the unenviable task of deleting the AI from Argit, without harming Ken, who's trapped in the cockpit.
Ken!
Run away!
Viola?
Dingo, the controls won't work.
Following a tricky balancing act of a battle with the hostile program, Ada is finally able to remove the simulated Viola from Argit's systems. This, however, reveals another problem. When Viola transferred herself over to Argit, she wiped out the onboard AI, and as Ken has no experience piloting without one, this means that, she's basically helpless. Now lacking control, Ken plummets to the bottom of the reactor core, which, of course, is volcanic in nature. Naturally, it begins to fill with lava, and Ken transfers Argit's signature subweapon, Wisp, over to Jehuti, begging us to use it to get her out of there. Going up. It's time to climb.
This is useful. Take it.
We have obtained the device driver for the sub-weapon Wisp.
If I'm falling, catch me with this.
Here they come. I'll grab you and take you to the top. Let's go.
Now that Ken is safe, and we've finally retrieved the vector cannon, she reveals that Noman has begun to activate Aumon. Looks like time is running short. But Dingo points out that as they stand right now, Jehuti is still no match for Anubis. Luckily, he knows somebody who can help with that. A scientist and former associate from his time at Bahram named Lloyd. Apparently, he has a lab atop Ayers Cliff, so that's our next stop. Ken hops over to Jehuti, getting nice and snug in the cockpit, and the unlikely trio ascend to the next area.
I'm sorry.
Are you from Marineris?
Yes. The northern part, Tharsis. It's far from the canyon.
As Ken and Dingo travel overland to Lloyd's lab, the two frame runners get to know each other a bit better. Or perhaps given that Ken is sitting in Dingo's lap, I should say more intimately. We learn that Dingo's tenure at Bahram started when he was enticed by a slogan on a recruitment poster, and that Ken and her family are from Mars. Apparently, her father was also a Bahram soldier, like Dingo. Could be a bit of a coincidence, maybe? We also learn about the ill-fated mission that led to Dingo's departure from Bahram. His unit was in charge of transporting a shipment of Metatron ore to Antilia, a colony in orbit of one of Jupiter's moons, and the setting of the first game. After completing their assignment, however, they were ambushed by a massive SF detachment. It turns out that they'd been betrayed by their commanding officer, Colonel Ridley Noman. Dingo was the only survivor. Upon learning the truth about Dingo's time at Bahram, Ken suggests again that if he'd returned to the paramilitary organization and tried to lead the soldiery in revolt, he would have been successful, but Dingo just laughs it off. As the two wrap up their discussion with a philosophical debate about what it means to have power and what it should be used for, we finally arrive at the outskirts of Lloyd's territory. Lloyd's lab is surrounded by a veritable maze of autonomous defenses. The only way through is via a very strictly prescribed path through a minefield, effectively turning the approach into a maze. Luckily for Dingo, Ken knows exactly where to go. Unluckily for us, however, this section is extremely tedious.
At first, go straight. If you stray off the safe route, I'll point out the right direction. If I say stop, be sure to stop moving. Then wait for the next instruction.
I see.
Then let's go. Move forward in a straight line. Wait, stop. Slowly correct the direction little by little. Right, a little bit more. To your right. To your right. To your right. To your right. To your left. To your left. To your left. Left a little bit more.
Upon clearing the maze, Lloyd welcomes us. He and Dingo are old friends after all. Our boy once saw the old man as something of a father figure. He's willing to give us what we need, if Dingo is able to prove he hasn't lost his edge.
Let me welcome you in a special way. Show me your skills.
Our unlikely pair touch down in the lab complex and set about finding the correct elevator that will take them down to meet the man himself.
Target confirmed. Start attack. BTR reaction gone.
Dingo, you managed to make it, but that was only practice.
I have no time to play with an old man. Make it quick.
It's all up to you. I'm waiting at the bottom.
What follows is a descent through a labyrinth of crushing pillars and swarms of raptors, cyclopes, neritas, pretty much every type of enemy frame we've encountered up to this point. It's a real gauntlet, and waiting at the bottom is the old man himself, Lloyd. As Bahram's top researcher and lead scientist, he's responsible for developing most of their basic orbital frames, as well as the thing we're here to get, a program that will enhance Jehuti's capabilities and let it fight on par with Anubis.
Welcome, Dingo. I don't suppose you have become rusty.
Lloyd hops into his skeletal orbital frame, Inhert, and challenges Dingo to a battle with the upgrade program as the prize.
Anubis is so powerful now.
I need your cooperation to resist Anubis.
The best technologies of Metatron combine to make Anubis almost perfect. Jehuti also has the same abilities. The performance of these two bodies is even, just like twins. But to match Anubis, Jehuti lacks one thing. A program to bring out the full performance of Jehuti.
If we get it, can we defeat Anubis?
That depends on the skill of the runner. If you want it, fight me first.
I said I have no time to play with...
No, I have another reason. I am in a different position from you. I have pledged my loyalty to Bahram. I cannot betray them.
You still cannot betray such an evil force.
It doesn't matter now.
I can't go easy on you.
Neither can I. Show me your best. Here I am. Not so good. You made progress, Dingo. Well done, Dingo. But how will you deal with this?
Missiles approaching. Please defend. F-mine approaches. Please evade it.
After a tense battle in the darkness, Dingo ultimately triumphs, and Lloyd prepares to hand over the system upgrade. It seems that the fight with Dingo was more than his old body could handle, though. As Inhert lies in a smoking ruin at the bottom of the arena, Ken retrieves the upgrade from Lloyd's cockpit. The scientist urges them to hurry, however. It seems Noman is on his way, and as it stands, Jehuti is still no match for Anubis. He also confirms what we've already seen ample evidence of, that Noman has gone mad with power. His intent in using Alman is not to conquer, but to destroy. Just as Ken finishes transferring the upgrade over, Lloyd warns Dingo that it will require some time to settle into Jehuti's systems before it actually takes effect. In the meantime, there's only one thing to do in the face of Anubis's yet overwhelming power. Run. And run fast.
It's unlocked. Dingo, here goes!
I got it! Get back here now!
Project Alman's purpose is not domination.
What?
Destruction.
The Colonel bursts through the ceiling, and, taking umbrage at Lloyd's betrayal, showers Inhert in a barrage of lasers, all but destroying what remains of the already damaged frame. As Dingo rages at his mentor's apparent demise, Noman reveals something about the storied final mission that our protagonist undertook during his time serving under Bahram. The load of Metatron ore that Dingo's unit died to protect was used to create the very frames they're piloting. In Noman's own words, this effectively makes Dingo both a pawn in the Colonel's machinations and a tacit part of Project Alman.
What did you say? Be glad. You are one of the units for Project Alman.
So this is that Metatron?
This angers Dingo even further, and the two go at it once again. Just as before, though, since Jehuti's upgrade hasn't yet manifested, we're still effectively powerless against Anubis. In a final bid to protect his protege, Lloyd distracts Noman, giving us time to escape. The insane Colonel isn't done just yet, though.
I entrust it to you, Dingo.
As Dingo departs, Noman crushes Inhert's cockpit, killing Lloyd and leaving Ken's fate unknown. Dingo flees the laboratory complex with the help of one of the Inhert clones. Just as he reaches the surface, Ken contacts him, sounding more than a little desperate. The bad news is that she's down underground, trapped beneath the wreckage of Lloyd's lab. Dingo is about to go back for her, but as Anubis is still down there, she tells him to stay away, that stopping Almon is too important.
I can't move anymore, but I know my body will attain my desire. Survivors have the duty to do no less. Please, stop Noman.
Suddenly, her transmission cuts off, and Dingo receives another message from Leo, letting him know that the remainder of the SF's troops are gathering at the entrance to Almon for one final push. Dingo resolves to meet them there to assist in the battle. Just as they start heading towards the battlefield, Ada warns of an oncoming group of enemies.
Enemy ahead.
Enemy fleet, 5 in total.
They're trying to attack the Levs on the ground.
Jehuti. Well, this is an unexpected quarry.
Looks like we've got another fight on our hands before we can take a crack at Almon itself. Jehuti is overtaken by the Baram fleet, who are also en route to the clash between their ground troops and the Space Force. In order to stop the quintet of warships from decimating the SF legions, we're going to have to wreck them before they reach the battlefield. Since their engines are protected by barriers of compressed space, this will give us a perfect opportunity to test out the vector cannon. Excellent. I've been waiting for a chance to bust this thing out.
I detect high energy levels. The main cannon of the battleship has great destructive power. Watch out for the battleship's main cannon. I can see the engine of the ship at its rear. Shift to vector cannon mode. All energy lines connected. Landing gear and climbing irons locked. Inner chamber pressure rising normally. Life ring has started dissolving. Ready to fire. The battleship is sinking.
In the skies over Vasilia, Dingo sinks the warships one by one, using the vector cannon to destroy each of their engine cores in turn. The last of Baram's ships plummets in flames, and just as it looks like we're in the clear, suddenly a massive orbital frame rises up through the clouds to challenge us. This is Zakat, one of Baram's trump cards. It's so huge, in fact, that it requires 4 runners just to pilot it. Well, looks like we've got a good old-fashioned Star Fox-style boss fight on our hands.
Don't underestimate us! Our enemy is Jehuti! Do your best to show him the power of the great Zakat! Get out of my way! Find another way!
Secure the main pass.
Fire!
Dingo brings the full might of the rapidly evolving Jehuti to bear and wrecks the mammoth orbital frame in a knockdown, drag-out laser spectacular.
Damn! This must finish! All hands! Take shelter!
The target has been destroyed.
With Zakat defeated, our dynamic duo is finally free to join the fight outside of Almon's gates, where the SF is on the back foot against Baram's overwhelming hordes of unmanned frames. Meanwhile, Colonel Noman finds Ken amidst the wreckage of Lloyd's lab and takes her hostage, with the ominous declaration,
"Let's go. It's time to activate Almon."
Now that it looks like things are coming to a head, here's my good buddy Kei-Nova once again to discuss the game's sound and graphics.
When it comes to visual presentation, Zone of the Enders: The Second Runner is a masterclass in style and flair. Shio Murata, known for his meticulous attention to detail and unique vision, unsurprising considering his work with Hideo Kojima, ensured that the game would not only play well but also look stunning. As with his other iconic titles, Kojima's pedigree as producer ensured that exceptional talents such as Yoji Shinkawa were a possibility, him being brought on board as both the art director and mechanical designer. Shinkawa's involvement in the project is no surprise given his long-standing collaborations with Kojima, and his distinctive artistic vision can be felt in nearly every single aspect of the game. In many ways, Shinkawa has become the Yoshitaka Amano of military sci-fi and mech design, carving out a niche where his iconic, fluid, and almost ethereal style continues to set trends in the genre. His work has always been a key ingredient in the success of Kojima projects, and The Second Runner is no different. Shinkawa's fingerprints are all over the game, with him being responsible for nearly all of the mechs, including the lead mech, Jehuti, which stands out as one of the most memorable designs in the series. However, Kojima doesn't stop with just one visionary at the helm. To further enrich the game's visual identity, he brought in a host of guest artists, both well-known and relatively obscure, each contributing their unique style to the project. Among them was Kazuma Kaneko, celebrated for his work on the Megami Tensei series, who lent his talents to design both the character Lloyd and the imposing frame Einhard. This inclusion added a darker, more enigmatic layer to the game's design, showcasing Kaneko's penchant for integrating mythological and religious undertones into his work. Additionally, Nobuyoshi Nishimura served as the game's special effects designer and was responsible for crafting the character designs, further enhancing the distinctive visual flair of the game. Tsubasa Masao, a skilled illustrator, was also pivotal, not only by contributing several of the character illustrations, but also by designing a few mechs himself. This fusion of different artistic styles is arguably what gives ZO2 its incredibly distinctive aesthetic. While Shinkawa's influence is evident, especially in Jehuti's updated design, which shares a clear lineage with Metal Gear Ray from Metal Gear Solid 2, the variety of influences from the guests sets it apart. Here, there is a celebration of mecha anime from the 90s, with overt nods to series like Gasaraki, Neon Genesis Evangelion, and perhaps even the lesser-known Brain Power. These series, much like ZO2, leaned heavily towards the pseudo-organic, combining sleek machinery and biological elements to create something that feels almost mechanical and alive. I mention these anime titles in particular because the design philosophy of ZO2 echoes the stylistic trends of that era. Much like the Metal Gear Solid series, especially Metal Gear Solid 2, there is a reoccurring Deus Ex Machina motif present throughout the game's aesthetic, which is particularly evident in the merging of Egyptian mythology with futuristic mechanical designs. This mythological layer adds a certain mystique to the game's world and makes the visuals feel otherworldly, yet a little bit familiar. The fusion of ancient motifs with hyper-advanced technology results in something that feels ethereal, transcendent even. It's not just a mech game, it's a reflection of humanity's mythological roots intertwined with its futuristic aspirations. To say that The Second Runner feels ethereal would be an understatement. It's a game that thrives on the tension between the known and unknown, the organic and the mechanical, the ancient and the futuristic, creating a visual spectacle pretty much unlike any other. The music of ZO2 is as integral to the game's identity as its iconic visuals and intense combat. Composed by Norihiko Hibino, with additional contributions from Akihiro Honda and Maki Kiraoka, the soundtrack creates an atmosphere that perfectly captures the game's mix of high-octane action and otherworldly ambiance. Much like Hideo Kojima's approach to gameplay and narrative, the music in ZO is both bold and deliberate, designed to immerse players in the futuristic, ethereal world of Jehuti and its cosmic battles. The score is a masterful blend of electronic beats, orchestral arrangements, and ambient soundscapes, each crafted to reflect the energy and tone of the game's various stages and scenarios.
Though it looks like an ordinary plane, there are plenty of armaments buried in the ground to fight off any invasion.
energy levels. The main cannon of the battleship has great destructive power. Watch out for the battleship's main cannon.
They want this frame, don't they?
Did you board this even though you knew?
I didn't want to involve my friends. Also, there's something I have to confirm.
From the opening moments, the music sets the stage for a larger-than-life experience. Tracks like Beyond the Bounds serve as the game's thematic backbone, with its sweeping, operatic vocals and pulsating rhythm driving home the sense of scale and grandeur. Sung by Maki Kirioka, this track became synonymous with the series, embodying both the game's futuristic vision and its emotional undercurrents. Its mix of traditional orchestration and electronic elements mirrors the very design philosophy of the game, where ancient mythologies blend with hyper-advanced technologies. It's not just a theme song, it's a reflection of the second runner's essence, pulsating with pure urgency and elegance. But it's not all grandiose orchestration. The soundtrack is just as comfortable delivering high-energy tracks during intense combat as it is dialing things down for more subdued, atmospheric moments. The combat music ramps up the adrenaline, keeping pace with the action on screen, but unlike many games that rely on pounding, repetitive beats, Zou 2's music feels more organic and dynamic. Tracks like Jehuti Returns and Trusting Peace build tension without becoming overbearing, layering electronic textures over rhythmic percussion, maintaining an almost meditative quality in their complexity. The music seems to ebb and flow with the action, escalating during high-stakes battles, then pulling back to let moments of tension hang in the air during quieter sequences.
No sign of the enemy.
Perhaps what's most striking about the soundtrack is its versatility. In many ways, the music mirrors the game's ability to transition seamlessly from massive set-piece battles to more intimate, almost introspective moments. During boss battles, for instance, the music shifts dramatically, bringing in darker tones and more experimental soundscapes, reflecting the high stakes and the weight of the confrontation. Tracks like Bahram, Battleship, and Viola AI are excellent examples of this tonal shift. They break away from the more melodic, structured pieces, introducing chaotic, dissonant elements that underscore the tension and unpredictability of the encounters. These moments are where Hibino's composition really shines, delivering a sense of unease that elevates the game's storytelling and enhances the emotional impact of the battle.
I've already recovered the vector cannon, and you are next. Are you ready?
And then there are quieter moments, stages or cutscenes where the music retreats into the background, allowing the soundscapes to take center stage. These tracks aren't meant to overpower the player's senses, but instead to subtly enhance the experience. Ambient pieces like Trusting Peace and Flowing Destiny create an ethereal atmosphere that captures the game's more reflective, almost melancholy undertones. In these tracks, Hibino plays with minimalistic electronic elements, creating a sense of space and tranquility amidst the chaos of the game's battles. It's easy to see how the music of Zou 2 complements the game's thematic dualities. The futuristic electronic tones are balanced by organic, almost classical arrangements, much like the game's blending of mechanical and the ethereal. Kojima's love for cinema and dramatic storytelling is echoed in the way the soundtrack punctuates the game's highs and lows, working in tandem with the gameplay to create a memorable cinematic experience. The score is more than just background noise, it's the pulse of the game, an emotional throughline that connects the player to the larger-than-life world of mechs, space battles, and existential conflict.
Most enemy attacks, except their burst attacks.
Fire!
And now, let's return to the narrative. Dingo arrives on the battlefield, but the SF garrison isn't exactly overjoyed to see him. In their eyes, as only Bahram possesses orbital frames, he must be working for the enemy.
Enough talk!
Are you Taper?
This guy is our enemy. Don't trust him.
What gives, dude? We've saved your bacon twice already. Suddenly, we receive a transmission from a Commander Elena Weinberg aboard the SF flagship Atlantis. Elena is another holdover from the first game. She was Leo's main point of contact during his journey, serving as a mentor figure to the boy as he came to grips with the grim reality of war. Now she's here, taking command of the SF troops in their fight against Bahram. Dingo attempts to attain some credibility through his association with Ken, but it turns out that she wasn't working for the SF after all. They've never even heard of her.
Ken Marineris. We have no such person registered with our forces.
What?
No one by that name is known to us.
Just as it looks like things are about to get violent, Leo arrives in the Vic Viper to assert that all assembled have the same goals, stopping Auman and defeating Noman. The situation is still fraught, however, as Elena repeatedly demands that Dingo hand Jeheti over, which of course he can't do. She makes it clear that every soldier present is willing to lay down their life for the sake of defeating Bahram and keeping the remainder of humanity safe. And while they may not like each other on a personal level, this is a name that Dingo can get on board with.
I don't like you, but I believe we all have the same reasons for fighting. But if you still want to shoot me, do it.
Whew. That was tense. Our difference is now settled. It's time to finish what we came here for, breaking through Bahram's defensive line and opening the way to Auman. Dingo takes command of the SF troops on the ground as Jeheti, Vic Viper, and the Lev Corps charge forward into battle with Bahram's autonomous legions. The clash itself is both massive and frantic, with Dingo desperately splitting his attention between taking on the enemy orbital frames and using Jeheti's Geyser subweapon to mark friendly units for Leo to heal. In fact, the only comparable gameplay experience I can think of, outside of something like a Dynasty Warriors game, is the Thousand Heartless battle from Kingdom Hearts 2. Suffice it to say, it's quite the spectacle. After fending off both the initial blitz and the surprise second wave that appears halfway through, constantly dashing back and forth to rescue friendly Levs from the swarming Bahram frames, the fight comes to a close, with Dingo and Ada tallying the number of casualties.
Survival rate of Lev unit is over 50%.
But some died. I can't be proud of that.
But more than half the pilots were saved.
Better than being absent, you mean?
Dingo prepares to descend towards Almon's gates, when suddenly Jehuti keels over before erupting in a massive Dragon Ball-style torrent of power. It turns out that a gigantic battle facing down everything Bahram had to offer was exactly what Ada needed for the upgrade we received from Lloyd to get nice and settled into the system. With that process now finished, we have access to the power of zero shift, meaning that finally, we can match Anubis on its own terms. It's time to tumble down the walls of Almon and bring the fight to Noman.
That's it.
That was a cargo route during construction. Descend along it and you will arrive at the outer wall of Almon.
This is gonna be a good warm-up. Let's go, Ada.
Roger.
Traversing the transit corridor leading to Bahram's fortress, we're able to get our first taste of combat using the fully realized power of Jehuti version 2. If this is what Noman and Anubis have been working with this whole time, it's no wonder we weren't able to keep up with them, much less defeat them. The difference between Jehuti now and Jehuti 5 minutes ago is mind-boggling. We're now able to wipe out entire squads of enemy orbital frames in mere seconds, with practically zero effort. As Ada puts it,
I suggest using zero shift. With Jehuti's current status and your skills, you will win easily.
couldn't have said it better myself. Jehuti has even gained an extra suite of superior properties. Its skirts have detached to become floating auxiliaries that augment the frame's already significant combat capabilities, firing extra shots and dealing additional melee damage. We've also gained a shield that automatically deflects anything less powerful than a burst attack. Basically, unless we're fighting against anything other than another boss-tier orbital frame, we're effectively invincible.
Dingo.
Ken!
I'm in the underground fortress. Noman is here as well.
How did you—
Listen, Almon is starting up now, but Dingo, don't come here.
I'm already very close.
Dingo, I lied.
As we approach the bottom of the shaft, we receive a transmission from Ken. She's still alive, it seems, and finally ready to come clean and reveal the truth of her situation. She wasn't working for the SF after all. She was just a Bahram soldier trying to stage a revolt against Noman. No wonder she kept bringing the idea of revolution up. And let's not forget, she's a legacy. Her father Richard was a soldier under Bahram, and a part of Dingo's unit, the one that was destroyed thanks to Noman's treachery. So, for everyone who's died as a result of the Colonel's actions, for humanity as a whole, and for Dingo himself, Ken reaffirms the reason we've come this far. We have to stop Noman and destroy Almon.
I've been dead once already. I'll bring it to an end myself.
You're very reliable, Dingo.
Noman.
Come here now. I can't wait to kill you. I'm glad, Dingo. I'm so glad.
Target confirmed. Enemy destroyed. ETR reaction gone. Enemy destroyed. ETR reaction gone. Enemy destroyed. ETR reaction gone.
We arrive at the outer walls of Almon itself. Silence descends, and we find ourselves facing down the ultimate defense, a barrier of compressed space. After saying goodbye to Leo, we bust out the vector cannon one final time, and make quick work of this last obstacle.
If you try, you just may win the battle.
I see. Let's take it easy, Ada.
Shift to vector cannon mode. All energy lines connected. Landing gear and climbing irons locked. Inner chamber pressure rising normally. Life ring has started revolving. Ready to fire.
Now, there's nothing left but to destroy the fortress, defeat Noman, and rescue Ken. Passing through the gateway, we find ourselves in an enormous space, so large that it stretches towards its own subterranean horizon. According to Ada, what we've found isn't actually Almon proper, but instead is just a control facility. It seems that we're not quite as done as we thought.
Then this isn't Almon?
You've come, Dingo!
Suddenly, we're ambushed by Anubis, but something about it looks off. It seems to be missing the array of vector traps that it normally has floating behind it, like a set of wings. That's odd. What could be going on?
Sorry, I was just trembling with excitement.
Well, let's get started.
That's odd.
Anubis!
Leo, wait!
What?
In a shocking twist, it turns out that Noman has stashed the captive Ken in the cockpit of what is actually a decoy Anubis. Reveling in Dingo's dismay, Noman proceeds to activate Almon, which begins tearing apart the roof of the control facility.
Look, Dingo! This is the power of Almon!
As our perspective pulls out beyond the Martian atmosphere, the true nature of Almon is revealed. The entirety of Mars's moon, Phobos, has been converted into the space fortress, which itself is one massive vector trap. This gigantic gravitic weapon is capable of destruction on an almost unimaginable scale, able to rip entire solar systems to pieces.
I will begin by destroying all of Mars!
Noman waxes poetic, claiming that in constructing and activating Almon, he is following the will of Metatron. If it wasn't clear before, it's amply evident now. The man is utterly insane. As the gravitational pressure blasts a hole through the control facility's roof and deals a catastrophic blow to Jehuti, Vic Viper and the false Anubis are sucked into the beam and sent rocketing towards Phobos.
This is the will of Metatron! Can you stop me, Dingo?
The damage sustained from the massive vector trap has disabled most of Jehuti's abilities, leaving us with only our basic functions and zero shift. While we're stuck in the gravitational beam pulling us towards Almon, Dingo declares that even robbed of all of his sub-weapons, he's confident enough in his abilities to be able to dispatch Noman and Anubis anyway. Looks like it's time for the real showdown.
Can we move?
Connection check. Available specs. Dash, burst, blade, grab, zero shift. That's all.
Well, more than enough to take him out.
Repeat a hit and run attack. I suggest using zero shift. Damage level exceeding 75%. Anubis is disabled for battle.
After a hard-fought struggle between the two evenly matched machines, Dingo eventually triumphs, striking a critical blow to the jackal-headed frame and sending it crashing into the surface of Phobos. As we head towards the terminus of the gravity beam, we catch up to the ruined Vic Viper and false Anubis, while Jehudi transforms one final time, reaching its ultimate form, naked Jehudi.
Ken, Leo, are you alright?
Yeah.
Ken! Ken!
Dingo.
I defeated Anubis. Are you hurt?
Setting the two damaged machines down on the moon's surface, we receive a communication from Elena with an alarming reminder that in the event of Jehudi's capture, Ada is programmed to self-destruct at the core of Almon. Thus, if Jehudi gets anywhere near the fortress's heart, Ada will have no choice but to detonate Jehudi's reactor and take all of Phobos with it. That's not good. With Dingo wired into the cockpit, what are we to do? Just as he's requesting aid for the injured Ken, the wreck of Anubis comes tumbling into the surface of the moon. It looks like Noman's down for the count, so it shouldn't be too tough to end the demented Colonel, once and for all.
It's the end for you, Noman. Same for Bahram.
Elena calls us up again to explain exactly what Almon is, how it works, and reiterates the danger that it poses. If allowed to activate fully, it could destroy the entire solar system. She begs Dingo to stop Noman, which our boy is only too happy to do with one condition: freedom for Mars. Apparently, Elena has the authority in regards to Earth's government to sanction the withdrawal of all SF forces and jurisdiction from Mars, which she vows to do. Dingo says a final farewell to Ken.
Dingo.
Ken, I got another job.
What are you going to do?
If I die, please revive me again.
You're not going to die.
Wait in the ship. I'll be back soon.
We head towards the abyss and get a demonstration of just how far Jehudi has come now that it's attained its final form. A pair of Nephthys clones rise up out of the fissure, and we're able to dispatch them with the casual ease with which we used to take out something as simple as a raptor. What was once a full-on boss fight is now just another piece of easy cannon fodder for the veritable machine god that Jehudi has become. With the pair of feminine orbital frames taken care of, Dingo and Ada follow Noman and descend into Almon's core. Deep beneath the surface of Phobos, in the heart of Bahram's fortress, all is chaos. At the center of a coruscating beam of energy float the remains of Anubis, surrounded by a storm of hexagonal plates torn from Almon's inner walls. Just as Jehudi has achieved the final stage of its evolution, so too has Anubis shed everything but its skeleton and fused with Almon itself, seemingly having reached some sort of mechanical apotheosis. Oh boy, if Noman was off his rocker before, he's gone completely and totally batshit now. The nature of Aomon has led to his mind and body being saturated with Metatron poisoning, ripping away any shreds of sanity he had left. He's fully convinced at this point that activating Aomon and destroying Mars, for a start, is fulfilling the will of Metatron, whatever that means. And it doesn't take much imagination to see that once he's done with the Red Planet, he intends to move on to the rest of the solar system and take humanity with it. Naturally, this is something that neither Dingo, nor Ada, nor we ourselves can abide. Time to put an end to this, for good and all. With the power of Anubis tearing Aomon's interior to pieces, the two frames and their runners go head-to-head, one final time, amidst the storm. As Jehuti and Anubis are once again evenly matched, it all comes down to the skills of their respective pilots. Just runner against runner. Just Dingo versus Noman. The battle is electric, dynamic, and brutal, as Dingo and Ada attempt to keep up with Anubis' ever-evolving abilities. The skeletal frame continues to exhibit all kinds of strange attacks, looking for all the world like the final boss of some late 90s JRPG, while Jehuti just does what she does best. Keep things simple, uncomplicated, and viciously effective.
You sacrificed us. Understand? You killed my comrades. So what? Those scum died so ungracefully. I wanted to see it with my own eyes.
They're waiting for you now.
It's all over!
Just because our villain is gone, however, doesn't mean that things are over quite yet. Noman may be dead, but Aomon is still on the verge of activating and tearing Mars to pieces. Plus, there's the outstanding issue of Jehuti's self-destruct protocol to consider.
Aomon is starting up.
Dingo, this is...
Get out of here!
You cannot escape from Aomon's radiating energy.
What should I do?
By blowing up Jehuti, the reactor will lose control. The resonance of energy will cancel each other out.
No! Ada!
Switching mode. I am ready to blow up Jehuti.
No!
Leo! Ah! Ada, radiate Jehuti's energy and strike it against the core of Aomon.
That's not enough.
If it doesn't work, do whatever you please. But don't just wait to die.
It's too late, though. The Viper isn't nearly powerful enough to do what needs to be done. And so, Ada charges in after him. Our heroes pass the event horizon of whatever strangeness is going on in the heart of the superweapon. And as the Vic Viper is blasted away, Jehuti suffers the brunt of the explosion. Aomon's erupting core reaches critical mass, and the last thing we see before everything fades away is Dingo struggling to hold on as he's overwhelmed by the immense outpouring of Metatron energy. But wait! Even though Jehuti is limping along on her very last legs, Ada still has one last trick up her sleeve. She hurls the remains of Anubis right into the heart of the erupting core, letting the wreck of the evil frame do what she was originally created to do. With the need to self-destruct now annulled, Ada flips Jehuti around and, rocketing out of Almon's core, pulls the Vic Viper to safety as Phobos vanishes in a massive flare of exploding Metatron. We see the fallout of the explosion, Ken watching from a distance in the false Anubis, searching for any sign of Dingo. Jehuti emerges from the wreckage, carrying the remains of the Vic Viper, and as what's left of Jehuti begins to disintegrate, Ken rushes to embrace the remnants of the mighty orbital frame. The music swells, the camera pans out, and the Atlantis arrives, taking our worn-out heroes on board for some much-needed aid. In the Atlantis' hangar, a distraught Ken hurries over to the ruined Jehuti, fretting over the unconscious Dingo, while Leo runs off to get help. Ken is able to awaken our boy. The first thing he sees upon opening his eyes is her smiling face. After coming to, he confirms what we saw during Almon's destruction, that since Jehuti and Anubis were basically equals in all regards, using the body of the villainous orbital frame served as a suitable replacement when it came to detonating Almon's core. As Leo and Ada joyfully reunite, Dingo espouses the lesson he took away from this whole adventure.
It's okay.
Use power for the right things. At least for the things that you believe in.
With his mission now complete, Dingo can, for the first time in what must feel like forever, leave Jehuti's cockpit. He's loaded onto a stretcher, and he and Ken share a little laugh about their exploits, Dingo finally asserting his trust in her.
I trust you.
She tearfully embraces him and, at long last, he's carted away to undergo the surgery that will return him to normal. Finally, the credits roll, and we see Jehuti and Ada undergoing repairs, with our beloved orbital frame returning to a state of completion. And that, dear Exiles, is the story of Zone of the Enders 2, The Second Runner. The narrative of ZOE 2, obfuscated as it is by a rather poor translation, is one of loss, vengeance, and ultimately redemption. At the outset, Dingo is a man in hiding, on the run from a past that he both regrets and holds a grudge over. When Bahram comes a-knockin', and he's forced to confront his memories, it's only through the relationships he develops with Ken,
Maybe.
Even if you're Bahram, that's too rough.
It sure is.
Who's the commander?
with Leo,
Jehuti is programmed to blow up at the core of Almon. In case of need, Ada will start up the explosion system automatically.
and most of all with Ada and Jehuti, that he's able to face down his demons, and ultimately conquer them.
Or stop.
He begins the story in a place of almost complete powerlessness, piloting a Lev that has literally no combat ability. And when he moves over to Jehuti, he's quickly pitted against and outclassed by the insane strength of Colonel Noman. Even then, after basically being killed, he still doesn't begin to truly develop any agency until after being wired into Jehuti. It's only through confronting the ghosts of his past and opening himself up to developing new relationships that he's able to put said memories to rest. When it comes to Ken, while she at first seems capable, both as a frame runner and as an agent of rebellion against Baron, ultimately she falls into the role of damsel in distress, a princess in a tower in need of rescue. Although I did appreciate that the developers stopped short of outright showing or implying an incipient relationship between her and Dingo. It's nice to see that not every male-female pairing has to end in romance. As for Noman, a villain who stands alone at the top and trades only on his own crazed lust for power, well, I think he makes for a pretty perfect foil for our protagonist. We may not get an especially deep insight into his character, but we don't necessarily need to. He fulfills his role with an appropriate lack of grace and aplomb. Unfortunately, due to poor sales, the second runner was the end of the Zone of the Enders franchise. In addition to the first game, there was also the aforementioned tactical RPG for the Game Boy Advance called Zone of the Enders: The Fist of Mars that fills in the story gap between ZOE 1 and 2, and a pair of animated adaptations, the first of which was an OVA titled Zone of the Enders 2167 Idolo, detailing the genesis of the orbital frame, and the second called Dolores I, a long-form series following a cargo transporter named James Lynx in his adventures with the orbital frame Dolores. I haven't watched the series, but the Idolo OVA is definitely worth a look, if for nothing other than the beautifully animated battle scenes. While it seems highly unlikely that we'll ever receive another entry in the Zone of the Enders series, one never knows. As with all cult hits, there's still a dedicated fanbase out there, and there's always the possibility that someone will decide to take a swing at resurrecting what appears to be a dead franchise. Until that day comes, and we once again get our hands on Jehuti's controls, we can but look out toward the stars and hope. This collaborative review with friend of the channel, Kei-Nova, was a ton of fun to put together. He and I are going to be undertaking a similar effort for release on his channel, so keep an eye out for that soon. And if you're not subscribed to his channel, then what are you doing? Get your butt over there and hit that bell. Which, speaking of, if you enjoyed this video, it did take a ton of effort to make, so I'd really appreciate it if you would take just a second to leave a like, even more so a comment, and most of all, if you felt inclined to subscribe. It just takes a couple of clicks and a few seconds for you, but it's absolutely vital to the survival of small channels like mine. Take care until next time. This is November Bravo, over and out.